Salut la famille, my name is Faisal Marjan. I am a portrait, swimwear, and boudoir photographer based in Poland. So on this video, I'll be taking you through my own technique of doing skin retouching. So grab some coffee and let's start. We are here on Photoshop. So as you can see, this picture already went through the basic adjustment of exposure, contrast, and saturation, as well as basic color grading. My software choice is Capture One, so that's what I use mostly for all my raw editing. So of course, all the heavy lifting of skin retouching is mostly done on Photoshop. So for the skin retouching, there is two main techniques that are used by serious or pro photographers or retouchers. The first one is called this frequency separation. So what does that mean? It's a process on Photoshop with which we separate the texture of the picture from its color. So like that, if we edit texture, we don't impact the color, and if we edit the color, we don't impact the texture. So that's a very powerful tool to do the editing. Of course, if you see, for example, an amateur doing the skin retouching, generally what they tend to do is to blur the skin, and what you see is that there is no more texture. You see the color looks good, but the texture doesn't exist. And the opposite, sometimes people clean all the pimples and all that, but the colors are all over the place. So this process helps us to separate both, so like that when we edit one thing, we don't necessarily impact the second. And of course, also it's a tool that is non-destructive, which means that if we make a mistake, we can somehow repair it. The second technique, which is called dodge and burn. So there are two types of dodge and burn. Of course, probably you already heard of it, which is dodge and burn is something quite simple, and it was used by photographers since the start of photography, which is to brighten what is bright and to darken what is dark. And like that, it makes the pictures pop. But there is something complementary also called the micro dodge and burn. So the micro dodge and burn is use the same process of dodge and burn, but you use it more precisely to even and smoothen whatever tones there are on the picture. It's a little bit hard to explain with words, but of course we will go through that and I will show you. So personally, I was using frequency separation for years. That was my technique of choice. I never did dodge and burn, the micro dodge and burn before, and I was thinking it's a scam. I was thinking it's one of those things that people try to hype just because it's hard, and it was a tool. Maybe in my mind it was a tool by which a lot of photographers and retouchers are trying to like make the skin retouching something inaccessible. Of course, we have that because people try to keep an edge over the others. So I was thinking that there is not much difference between the two until lately when I tried it and I saw the difference. That's a tool that is very powerful, which is the micro dodge and burn. So after that, I found certain limitation on what people are using the dodge and burn, the techniques that people are using. So I came up with my own technique of combining both words. So I will show you what I mean by all that. So the first thing that we will be doing is to generate a frequency separation. So for that, there is tons of actions that are online, and there's also a lot of tutorials on how to create it. So for us not to waste a lot of time, I have one action where actually it's a lifesaver for me, where I combine all the layers that I need for editing on one action. So I call it all in one action. So I will launch it, and don't get scared when you will see all the things here, because we will not use most of that here. So the first thing when you are creating the frequency separation, it asks you always for the Gaussian blur. So the Gaussian blur is extremely important because that's what the system will use to determine what is texture and what is color. So when it asks you for choosing the Gaussian blur amount, you need to choose a radius which will blur the picture, but at the same time you still can see all the detail of the picture. So for example, in this case, for example, a radius of 18, we can see that everything is blurred, but at the same time we still can see that the eye, the mouth, the nose. So I think a radius of 18 is good for this picture. So let's start it, and as you can see, all the things that I use generally for editing my pictures are already generated. So those things we will not use them today. So we have the skin retouching. So this is the frequency separation. So as you can see here, the gray layer is the texture layer. So this thing has all the texture of the picture. The second one here is the color. So here we have only the color without the texture. So here we have some check layers that we use just to help us do the editing. We don't necessarily need them, but it helps us do the editing. For example, the skin blemishes. So it helps us just to locate whatever needs to be edited. And here we have the dodge and burn. We will go through it and I will show you how to create one. And again, other check layers for that. Okay, so we'll be starting with the first thing. So why I told you that I combine both techniques is because most people, when they do the dodge and burn, they start with something like that. They create an empty layer and they go here, for example, in the picture, and they start with the clone, the healing brush, and they start to heal all the blemishes that, okay, let's, yeah, it's working, okay. So what they do is that they take a healing brush and they start to do things like that for all the blemishes that they see. That's what general people do, and actually it does a good job. But when you use the healing brush, it's Photoshop that determines what the texture and what the color needs to be on that particular area, using whatever it's surrounding it. So for example, when you do that, Photoshop determines what the color here was supposed to be and what the texture was supposed to be. For me, the reason why I don't like that, because the whole point of using the dodge and burn is to have control over what you are doing. And of course, also not touching the colors and the texture in a very destructive way. So that's the reason why I don't like that. So that's why I generate the frequency separation, and instead of taking out the blemishes on an empty layer using the healing brush, I use the frequency separation and especially texture layer to do my healing and my blemish removal technique. So how do we use that on a frequency separation? So we don't use the healing brush, but we use the clone stamp tool. So the clone stamp tool, what it does, it's not like the healing brush. The healing brush, it uses AI or whatever to determine what, for example, this area should look like. When you use the clone stamp tool, you have to choose whatever area you want to sample. For example, I think this area is good for this, so I will take it and I will sample it. So like that, you have control over what you are doing, and also you're only impacting the texture because you are only editing on the texture part. So let's start here and we can do that for this picture. So just something very important when you are doing the skin retouching, make sure that you do not remove anything permanent that the subject has. For example, if it's a pimple, the pimple probably just showed up this week or this month, so it's something that generally you can remove. But when you have something permanent on the person, like a scar or some birthmark or something like that, that's part of the identity of the person. So you don't generally touch that, unless of course the person asks you to remove that. There are people with insecurities and sometimes they don't want certain parts of them shown on their pictures. So Please be mindful when you are doing the editing, because we are tempted to remove everything that looks bad to us. But please be mindful whenever you are doing the skin retouching not to touch anything permanent. So we will be doing here the skin blemishing, and it will take a little bit of time. So I will probably speed forward this video and see you later on. Welcome back. So we finished all the blemishes editing. So as you can see, let's go do a before and after. So you can see that a lot of the spots and all that were removed using that. So of course we used the frequency separation, so no impact was done on the color, so we only touched the texture. So here is where we will start doing the dodge and burn. So the dodge and burn is something easy to create. So all you have to do, and let's remove this one. Let's create it from scratch. Let's create another one just for you. Okay, so to create a dodge and burn is quite easy. You go to your curve layer, you create a curve, and you go to a bright area of the picture, and you brighten it, something like that. And you invert the mask with Command A to invert it, to make it black. Of course, when it's black, the mask, when it's black, it means that it conceals. When it's white, it reveals. And we will explain why we are reverting that later on. We create a second curve layer, and this time we go to an area that is relatively dark, and we darken it. Okay, and of course, and we invert it. So this one is the dodge, and the burn is the dark. So let's create this. Of course, we already have a dodge and burn, so let's not get confused. So it's quite simple. So we have the dodge and burn. So what we will be doing? We will be starting with what is called the global dodge and burn. The global dodge and burn, we take a brush, and it needs to be a soft brush. So the hardness of the brush should be set at 0, and we change the flow to 1. The flow should always be at 1, not the opacity, but the flow. There is a subtle difference that makes all the difference. So we go on the dodge, and here we have the invert check layer. So this check layer also is something that's easy to find on internet. So this check layer helps you exactly visualize what is dark and what is bright on the picture. So here, whatever you see that is dark on this check layer, everything that is dark, it means that it's bright actually on the picture. And whatever is bright is actually dark on the picture. So the global dodge and burn means that we are doing something general, not micro, but it's general. So whatever is bright, all the areas that are bright, we try to brighten them. all the areas. For example, this area here is bright, this area here is bright, this area here is bright, this area here is bright. So we do generally, we brighten whatever is bright. For example, here we have a lot of things that are bright. And the same thing with the darks. So this area here is dark, this area here is dark, this area here is dark, this is dark, this is dark, and here. So here we did what is called a general dodging burn. It's not finished yet. So now we will start to go to the micro dodging burn, which is the powerful one. So what we try to do with the micro dodging burn is that, if you can see here, for example, there is something that looks a little bit odd. Is that, for example, this area here we have, it's bright, this here is dark, this here is bright, this one is dark. So it's not something pleasing, it's not smooth. So what we try to do with the micro dodging burn is that we try to smooth out all the transitions and also all the areas, which means that everything should be smooth, and the transitions from dark to bright should be also smooth. So for example, here we will start with whatever is bright. So let's go with the dodging burn here, and we will be doing it to this area here that we suppose it's meant to be bright, but it wasn't. So we try to even it with whatever is surrounding it. So it needs to be a little bit even with the surrounding. The same here, they should be a little bit bright. Of course, always with the flow of one. So each stroke of the brush is only doing 1%. So like that, we just apply the exact amount that we want. Not too much, not too much. So we just put little by little until we see that whatever we did is enough. So here, let's do here a little bit. And okay, I touched something. And here, okay, it's not finished yet, but let's. Okay, so we have this area here. So let's finish first with the forehead. So here we can play with those adjustments until we see a nice check layer that will help us locate whatever we think. So for example, this way we see exactly what we need to work on. Okay. So we call that micro dodging burn because you do things on the micro level, on the small level. So you can see we are doing extremely small areas with the small brushes. So now we'll go, for example, here to the dark one. And for example, this area here looks too bright compared to the surrounding. We will even it. So we keep doing that until we are comfortable with whatever editing we are doing. So let's see here. Okay, good. Let's continue with the other areas here. So let's see the dark parts. So for example here, it looks a little bit brighter than darker than here. Okay. We keep playing always with the levels until we are sure that what we are doing is good enough. White brush. Okay. Here, for example, in this area here, you can see that here it's too bright, and here it's not even. So let's take the bright brush, the dodge one, and we try to even the thing. Let's see. For example, here we can see that this area here is darker than the surrounding. And let's go to the burn and let's even it. So the power of the dodge and burn is that you don't touch, you are only playing with the brightness. You are not touching the color, you are just touching the tone of the picture. You are not touching the color, you are not touching the texture. All what you are doing is only playing with the brightness and the darkness. And that's extremely powerful because it keeps the subject as it was. You are just playing with its brightness and darkness. And actually, this is more than enough. You don't necessarily need to touch the colors or touch the textures for a lot of things. So that's the power of such tool. So here, for example, this area here needs a little bit of brightening. Some here. And some here. Okay. Okay, let's go a little bit harder. Okay, so as I mentioned, the most important is that everything needs to be smooth. Everything needs to be smooth. All the transitions should be good. Now we are doing everything using the check layer. So we are using the check layer from the beginning because it's extremely hard to see things just with your eyes. You need to have something to guide you on what is on the picture, what is bright, what is dark. You cannot do that just by looking at the picture with your naked eye. Okay, let's see here, and let's see this area here. Okay. Oh, yeah, I need to edit here. Okay. And here, let's see where we are. So you can see we already did a lot when it comes to, okay, it's not finished. There is certain things that we need to address, but let's address them now without using them. So for example, here the transition between the dark area and the bright one was not really smooth, so let's do it this way. Okay. Here as well, we can see that this area here probably was darkened mistakenly. And that's also something very important, is that sometimes, because you rely only on the cheek layer, you see something that is surrounding it that is all bright and you think, oh, this should be also bright, or the opposite. So sometimes you need to go back and forth between the check layer and the picture just to make sure that you are actually doing what needs to be done on that area. So why this tool is good? Because it's non-destructive. So everything that you do, you can revert it. So now with a flow of 100 and with a black brush, I will brush on the burn layer, and here you can see we can just remove whatever we did. So whatever we did there will be removed. Okay. So let's go back to a white and a flow of 1, and we can put again the check layer, and now we know that this area needs to be okay. We reset a second time, and let's see. Okay, so now we know that this area here needs to be a little bit brightened, and this one here a little bit darker. Okay, let's do a brighten. Okay. So this area here needs to be a little bit brightened, and this area here should be a little bit darkened. We can also do all that without using the check layer. So for example, let's do it here like that. And let's see. Here we smooth the transitions between the dark and the bright. Here we can see also that there's areas that are a little bit too bright for their surrounding. Zoom it out a little bit so we can see here that it's a little bit too much. Okay, we can even do the close-up in case we need to. So actually this is an extremely powerful way of removing anything. Okay, let's do the neck part. I think the neck part is, we already did quite good there. We can do the same thing that we did for the face. We can do it on all the body. And here, let's just and we can see clearly. Okay, now let's see a before and after. So you can see that's the before, that's the after, that's the before, that's the after of the skin retouching of this picture. Before, after, and that's mostly only with the touch and burn. The last thing before going, I will show you a bonus trick that I have, which is also a combination of the frequency separation and the touch and burn. So in the touch and burn, there is two techniques that generally people use. There is the first one, which is the mixer brush tool, which is what is used generally for doing the work. And this tool and this brush, it just takes the color. Imagine that it's like a wet brush, like a painting brush, and it takes a color and it brushes all over the other colors. So for example, here you can see what it does. So that's one of the techniques that people are using for the frequency separation. The second one is to blur the color. So to blur the color, when you blur something, it just makes it softer. So the transitions between the dark and the bright, and also between the colors, become a little bit smooth because it was blurred. So what we can do as a bonus here, that we'll duplicate this layer, the color layer, and we will apply a Gaussian blur to it. So we go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and we generally apply the same radius that we used for creating the frequency separation. So for example, for this frequency separation we used 18, we will use 18 as well here. So we will click on OK, and we invert the mask. So we make it black. So when we make it black, it concealed it. So now what we can do is we take a brush and we put the flow at 100% and the hardness at 0, and we can even brush over the areas that we want to smoothen even more. So for example, here it makes a really good effect, and it's a little bit different. So you can see it's smooth a little bit. This is a bonus trick that I use from time to time on my portraits, and that you can use as well. So guys, that's all for my skin retouching routine. That's what I do for all my pictures. So feel free to let me know if you have any questions. And if you like this type of content, you can let me know as well, and I will make more of it. So please subscribe, and see you on the next one. Bye.